Our guest is in his 10th year as superintendent of schools at Lebanon R3. During his tenure, the public voted a tax levy increase in 2018, one of the first in many, many decades. And then the board was able to pass a bond issue this past year. In 2024-25, he was named the Missouri Superintendent of the Year. Prior to coming to Lebanon, he was a longtime administrator at the Springfield Public School System, including stints as a principal both at a high school and a middle school. Originally from Richmond, Missouri, he taught for 8 years at Nevada and then had a short stint as assistant principal at Fulton. He retired from the U.S. Army Reserves after 22 years in 2010. I'm David Millsap, and in the box is Dr. David Schmitz. Dr. Schmitz, I know that over the past several months, and really going back to the first of the year, a lot of controversy. We had a very heated, I thought, and contested school board race recently, at least online. There's been a lot of talk about the property tax issue, and I want to get into that, and we'll get into the weeds a little bit on that. But having been in a position at times where, controversy occurs and there becomes a lot of talk and a lot of things centered around you, there has to be a time during all that you have to take a step back and try to refocus on the mission at hand. How were you able to do that during that time period?
Sure. For one, I would say that it's really just a great thing that people are interested in our schools. I mean, it's really such a positive thing that Lebanon cares so deeply about our kids and our community. I mean, it's such a positive thing. And I think there are times that are difficult anytime you do public service. And I think that's why they call it service, is while I'm employed and hired by a Board of Education, I really do feel like service is my responsibility. And I think my entire team, the expectation is that we understand that our purpose is to serve the people who do the real work in our system. And I say that, and it sounds maybe disingenuous, but the reality is that the people who do the teaching and the learning in our school system are the core. That's why we do what we do. I mean, it's really all about the kids. There are so many things that could be distractions. And so I think in the difficult times and times when there are distractions, it's really so important to remind myself and certainly our leaders and our team that we are doing remarkable things for 4,500 kids and hopefully making their life better along the way. And there's so much noise that can happen, but at the core, that's why we do what we do. And remembering your why we do what we do is so critical.
And I know that once you make that decision, that leap, and you did it many years ago, of I'm going to move up the ladder to principal and then into the central office at Springfield, and then as a superintendent, you take on that responsibility as a whole, and you know that there's going to be scrutiny and you're not going to make everybody happy. You just kind of learn how to deal with that. I don't know if you ever get the opportunity on a Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock and after all these meetings and emails and conferences and phone calls, to look at somebody and go, I'm going to go back to a classroom, to sit in a classroom and watch a teacher teach. Did you teach science, I think?
I taught social sciences.
Social sciences. So, I'm going to go over to the middle school and I'm going to sit in the social science class so I can just remember what it was like to be in that classroom and be around students.
Yeah. It just comes back to what I was saying earlier is what's our purpose? I absolutely love kids. I loved kids when I was in the classroom. I had the privilege of coaching wrestling and football. I loved my classroom time dearly. I didn't ever leave. And in fact, sometimes I'm cautious of people who choose to do this kind of job because they're ready to get out of the classroom. I loved the classroom, but I felt led, and my faith is really important to me, and I felt like it was time and just a direction I needed to go to have maybe a more broad influence and impact. And so while I loved the classroom and love that, I thought that I could have even a bigger impact. And I've been really fortunate to be able to do that in leadership, really by empowering other people along the way. But most definitely, some of the most important times I get to have, whether it's on a Friday, and to be honest with you, it really starts Mondays. Mondays are my days that I try to be in the schools, and visited schools today, in fact, and just to see kids and get to talk with them and just to remember, what it's all about. Because there is, as I said, there's just so much noise, and it comes down to one student at a time, and those relationships are pretty pivotal.
I would think that, you always hire this young teacher that comes in and their focus is the classroom. Then 2 or 3 years later, they're starting to look at that, wanting to move up the ladder. And certainly nothing wrong with people that
Sure.
have that. But do you sometimes want to look at them and go, enjoy your time in that classroom?
I think so. I mean, it's just really it is a special time, and there are people who are just designed to be in the classroom. You see people who do it for 30 years, and they just continue to have the same passion on year 30 as they do in year 1. But yeah, that's the purest sense of what we do is what happens in the classroom. And I just think that I just thought about it when I was in the military. Is there's somebody doing all the different jobs. There are people in the military who are doing finance, or who are cooking, who are certainly war fighters, as we would call them. There are people who have such diverse jobs, and that is true in a school system. And so honestly, David, what gives me a great deal of satisfaction, because I think that my job is to support an environment where teachers can teach and kids can learn. It gives me joy to go visit a cafeteria and talk to the ladies or the gentlemen who are working there, or to go to the transportation and see those people who are the first smiling face at the beginning of the morning, sometimes at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they're the last smiling face they see as they get off the bus. So absolutely, the people who make the real difference are there, and it is easy to lose track of that, and certainly sometimes we. I don't know if to say you think back to more simpler days, because I would say that none of their jobs are simple and easy. It's a challenge no matter where you are. But if everyone is doing their part and everyone is contributing, and that's what I think makes our system so special, is that we have people who have been empowered to live where their talent is, and they're just doing incredible work, whether it's real world learning and helping kids find their passions and interests, or it's at our early childhood center helping those little 3-year-olds. It may be with physical therapy, helping them to be able to do things that they couldn't do when they got to us, or teaching them their alphabet. It's just incredible. It is so amazing to see the growth of young people, and it is also, as a leader, so it makes me tick to see adults thrive and flourish. My wish, my desire is for people to reach their potential. And it isn't just kids, it's the adults too.
Let's go back to 2018 when the tax levy was proposed. We had passed a tax levy here in decades. We're able to pass that. One of the selling points, I thought, was the retention of staff, not only certified but non-certified. Then COVID hits, a lot of people got out of the profession. How's our retention rate with certified, non-certified staff now?
Sure. Well, Lebanon as a community absolutely stepped up. And that the whole proposition of Lebanon schools was based on core promises of staff pay being competitive, because that's only fair and critical to make sure people are compensated in a way that will help them have a viable income or a viable life. But facilities and bus safety, there were so many pieces to that puzzle. Even statement, it was one of the 4 promises was that every kid would have a clear plan for their future. It really was letting our community know what are the gaps, what is the shortcoming, because I think maybe they didn't fully understand just where we were, and in particular with staff, as you said, we were at the very bottom. We compare ourselves to 19 other school districts, and we were at the very bottom in every pay category. And when Lebanon said yes in 2018, it was transformative, because it provided resources for the district to begin to improve that pay. I'm kind of a student. I like to read, and there's a book called it's called Drive by Daniel Pink, anyway, it talks about that there's a certain level where compensation is a big deal. And it is. I mean, we want to compensate our staff. But what I would say, makes an even bigger difference right now in our retention, which our retention is very good. It has gotten so much better. It has been just a total turnaround since really 2018. And yes, COVID was difficult, but I think that this community loves its schools so much. There's a community of kind, caring, and compassionate people, and Lebanon's a unique place. And I don't just say that because I lead the school system. I've worked in many school systems. Culture is something that is pivotal. Positive, supportive culture is very difficult to manufacture. We had that. What we didn't have were resources. And it only took letting our community know and understand this gap that was there. And hey, our most precious possession, staff who we entrust to take care of kids, are not staying with us. They aren't being compensated fairly. And we've been able to change that. And that's because Lebanon chose to take care of our schools. And we could not ever stop being thankful and saying thank you to our community for that, because it's huge.
And I warned you when we started this interview that you would take me down, you may take me down a path, and so you've taken me down a path. You talked about compensation, and that is huge, especially when we were in competition with the Camdenton School District, Waynesville School District, and our pay was much lower than theirs, and that's a 20-minute trip. So you've got to compete with those people. But there's been a lot of studies with, especially with Gen X and new millennials who you're now hiring as teachers, that they want a work environment in which they feel like they're valued. They want a work environment in which there's a lot of teamwork. So I would assume that, and you've been in the business a long time, that in some ways your leadership has to adapt to their needs of that team building and that relationship among their peers.
Right, and you're so right. I've been doing I entered education in 1992, and there is a significant difference in just generational work ethic, and it's not to say that it's good or bad. It's just different, and so people are more collaborative. There are different boundaries, and I would honestly argue that to some degree, a generation that we're hiring now probably do a better job of personal self-health boundaries than maybe I did growing up in my work experience. Just having healthy boundaries, but we know that culture matters, and so what our community will see a lot of is us trying to tell the story. Definitely after COVID, because nationally public education took a real hit in the mouth, a punch in the mouth, just because of some union behavior across the nation, some images that were painted that aren't reflective of our staff anyway whatsoever. And so what we seek to do is celebrate our staff. We have regular difference makers, and we encourage the community to let us know who's making a difference, whether it's a community member or a teacher or a bus driver. We want to celebrate them, and the reason we do that is because that person feels really celebrated, but then it also lets our community at large know what amazing people are doing. And because, as you said, a paycheck is really important, and we all want that. But when we can feel appreciated, valued, and cared about, and that just opens the floodgates for people to really invest in our staff. And I would remind everyone, it isn't just teachers. It's everybody. We have retention rates for our bus drivers. We've in the past couple of years, we've had full staff and bus drivers. That was unheard of for decades probably. And our food service, we were fully staffed. And so every single part of our system, every position, all of them, because we said that all staff pay would be competitive within 5 years, and we've done that. And we make sure we seek to monitor changes every year, and we're constantly working against a moving target. But that's our priority, because, as you said, it's a 20-minute drive north or east. And what I say, and I think our community, if I could just ask our community to never stop supporting the schools. I joke and say we love Lebanon so much in Lebanon, and I feel like Lebanon is my town. It's where I hope to see grandkids someday and to just enjoy life, and I continue to. But we have we love our schools so much that we paint our water towers black and gold, our fire trucks. And I just would encourage our community to never stop that, because as I say, especially in a future of choice and competitiveness in schools, we want to make sure that while we will seek to be competitive in pay, we lead the way in culture. We have such a sense of community. That's what drew me to Lebanon. As I supervised ball games here. I came, and yes, the crowds can be a bit boisterous, and it's just passion. But
That's because you were at Kickapoo, okay?
You aren't supposed to say that, David. but I recognized that there was absolute passion and a sense of community. Lebanon loves Lebanon, and that's what's awesome, and that's a retention tool. We just have to continue to lift up our schools and fill it with the positive that exists, and that's so critical.
I want to go back to something that, again, online, and we're seeing a lot of this, it's been in the news, is the property tax issue. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing more complicated than school funding. Once the school funding formula is hard to understand at the state level, now that we've had the state auditor come out and say that communities have an opportunity to roll back the property tax, the school board, based on your recommendation, I assume, made some decisions on how much that was, and some people are upset that it was not the total amount. In a nutshell, and again, in layman's terms, for the host here,
sure.
Explain exactly where we're at and what was the thinking.
Sure. So the Lebanon R3 schools have a voters have approved a levy amount of $4.49, and so that's a voter approved levy amount that is really there, and we're so grateful for that. And 90 cents of that was specifically approved in 2018 as a part of the Proposition Lebanon schools, and so those allocations are for two buckets, and this is how I try to explain it for folks. We have a bucket that is for operations. And operations are just that, to run the school, to pay for the lights, to pay staff, take care of benefits, to put gas in the buses, everything operational. And the district could do some, maintenance. We do maintenance out of that. So some capital work could happen in that. But generally speaking, those dollars are critical for the classroom, is what I call it. It's to make sure what happens in the classroom is supported, period. The other bucket is debt service, and that bucket is for bricks and mortar. It's for construction, and so in 2014 is where the 84 cents originally of that 449 was approved, and that was for Lebanon Middle School, and thankfully our community said, hey, let's reissue some bonds, $41 million worth of bonds in April 2024. And so we were able to just reissue that without changing the voter-approved levy. So 449 stayed the same. And that was our commitment, is that it would remain the same to the community, and yet we can do remarkable things with that. So the two buckets cannot mix. They are separate. And so now the board can levy in the two buckets, and they do levy in the two buckets. But if they move levy to debt service, it's restricted, and so they can't move it back without a vote of the people. So the board has liberty to move levy between the buckets. And they do that for the efficient and good stewardship operations of the district. And so when we passed Proposition Lebanon Schools, the operating bucket was set at $3.65. And all of our projections for these massive increases to expenditures, and I say massively because it is, we went from, in 2018, spending $32 million a year on staff pay and benefits, all staff, to now over $48 million. So that's a huge load, and that is based, and we're able to do that because the levy remaining steady with steady growth in the assessed values. What happened this year is that we had multiple years of no growth in the assessed values. In fact, most people, if they were to look over the past 4 or 5 years, did not see growth in the residential in particular. There was flat. And so the state tax commission made some directives that we have to get back into compliance. Compliance means that everyone's home, residential or commercial property is at 90 to 110% of market value. So if I have a $100,000 house, it should be assessed at $90 to $110,000. And so I think the state tax commission has identified that we're lagging significantly behind that. And so for multiple years, we've not seen a levy change, not a levy change, but assessed value change with residential. Mm-hmm. And so when the corrective action was initiated, it enacted this thing called the Hancock Amendment, which forces a rollback of that. Well, the challenge we face, and I shared this with the board, and it was talked about in open session, and I will explain it as simply as I can. We are operating on a budget, anticipating revenues to support these significant increases in staff pay. We bought over 30 new buses in this time period. We're fixing facilities as far as preventive maintenance. And so here we don't have we have this issue with the Hancock Amendment. Had we had steady CPI or inflation-based growth in each of those previous years, then we would have seen Hancock. It would have been a gradual increase. I shared with our staff, I said, would you rather have a percent or two a year or nothing and then a big, huge increase? Well, no one wants the big, huge increase. Steady as she goes is an easier thing for all of us to budget. Well, it created a 13.8 cent reduction to that 365. We forecasted for all those staff pay and benefits and all that we've implemented over the past 7 years based on a steady levy and steady growth. Well, here we have to reduce it. And we did reduce it. So that levy did go down by 13.8 cents. The board continues to understand that they have a voter-approved 449. This other bucket, the debt service bucket, actually the ceiling, the highest the board could levy. Now, the board could actually levy higher than voter-approved, which is crazy. I mean, no board member would get reelected. I mean, right. Nobody, and I wouldn't keep my job if I recommended that we levy higher than the 449. And I'm probably not making this very simple to understand, David. I'm sorry.
I'm with you so far.
Okay, so the challenge we face is we have 449 in a voter-approved levy, and because of the Hancock Amendment, it forced our operating funds. It's like we've agreed to all these expenditures. If it's my household, we've agreed to these expenditures, and now I got a pay cut. From a standpoint, and some would say, well, you did get new revenue. We've projected substantial growth because we've now spent $48 million a year on salaries, and that continues and needs to continue to grow,
right? Or
we won't keep teachers. But now we've lost this growth in the debt or in the operating. So what I recommended to the board is because the debt service ceiling was like 20-30 cents higher than what we've been levying. So there's actually room in that. And so the board discussed the fact that the voter approved is 449. So they have the latitude to levy in those two buckets, how they choose. And so they levied there, knowing that because they raised the levy and the debt service side, keeping the voter approved, they did decide to do a 2.5 cent reduction in that overall levy. That moving it over in this spot, knowing, and I will tell the community this, we have to get those 13.8 cents. We have to get levy back in operating. We can't sustain the expenditures that we have initiated for the past 7 years because of Proposition Lebanon Schools, because of the expectation that we would have this 365 levy and then have it reduced. That just doesn't jive with math and what we need to do. And so in the next year, it's going to be up to the board as to when they do this, but they may ask the community because they cannot move it back from debt service without permission from the voters. So there may be an ask in the next year 2 or however long, whenever the board chooses to do that, to ask voters to move that back into operating. Not changing not changing the levy. We would not and do not increase the levy to do that. But what we want to do is, in a nutshell, and this is the best way I've ever heard it said, is because of Hancock, we've lost levy for the classroom. And to protect that and keep that levy for the future, we were able to levy it in debt service. We need to get it back in the classroom. I mean, really, if I could wave a wand and do it now, we never would have reduced that because we have to remain. It's one thing for us to be in the middle of the pack on staff pay, but we can't just rest on our laurels and expect that we're going to stay there, because there are other people who are raising their pay. And so so there will be a day when we have to ask the community, would you, without changing the levy, move that back into the classroom so we can continue to take care of the critical needs of the schools. We wouldn't have reduced it, we wouldn't have removed it, but for the Hancock Amendment. And so I don't know if that was clear enough. It's probably clear as mud for most of the people listening, but it's...
No, I think it does clear up things. And I think that everybody understands, to me, that's simple, that the commitment made in 2018 needs to continue, but we also need to keep in mind that the cost of living in 2018 is not the cost of living in 2025 for those teachers in the classroom and for staff members. So that money that's over in the bucket now that we need to get back over here only makes sense, or we lose traction.
We do.
And on that. So, but I also, and I think we all understand, everybody that's a property owner in Leclerc County, nobody wants their taxes to go up. I don't want them to go up. You don't want them to go up. But there are demands and services that we have to have.
Yeah, and you know, I love driving to work on good roads. I'm grateful for the services we have. I'm thankful for public needs, public service that occurs. And what I know is that great schools help businesses thrive. Great schools draw people to a community. I had a realtor tell me that they're so thankful that when they bring new patrons into the community, they get to drive to a myriad of schools who now look so good and have great learning spaces. Schools are a big deal. And to your point on the operating piece, we can't let ourselves slip backwards in that. And I agree with you that nobody likes to pay more tax. In fact, I would prefer for it to just be steady increases as inflation occurs. But for the past 3 to 4 plus years, we've not seen that growth. And then the corrective action occurs. And unfortunately, because of the forced rollback, we're still behind from where we would be had that been happening for the past 4 to 5 years.
And to go to your point, and then I want to move on to something else, is that especially in communities like Lebanon, and maybe more so in Lebanon than other communities, the school is really, in many ways, the identity of this community. I truly believe that. You know, both of us worked in Springfield a majority of our career. Springfield is not defined by its public school system. If it's defined by anything, it's the colleges that are there right. from an educational standpoint, and the medical things that go on in Springfield. I think people would be surprised that I think the population of Cox Hospital in Springfield during the daytime is 30,000 people.
Wow!
And so if you and Mercy would be probably that or more. But Lebanon has identified a central part of this community as that school. I want to talk about learning a little bit and some things on the national level. COVID hit in 2020. The schools get shut down in the spring of 2021. Nationally, their studies showed that those students that were affected by that shutdown have not regained reading and mathematical skills that they had testing prior to COVID. Where are we at with our students that suffered through the COVID shutdown academically?
Sure. I think that it is so accurate that there are groups of kids who are at pivotal phases in their learning journey, who were maybe learning to read or learning foundational math skills, who because of the way the environment was with COVID in Lebanon, but then nationally, whose learning was just disrupted, and so it is a concerted effort of ours to help them catch up. And I think I'm going to chase a rabbit for a second, and then come back to your question. It is incredible for parents in the community to understand that we can't let students start behind. Once they get behind, we really are chasing it. It is very difficult to catch up. That's why we're working in part of a statewide leadership group called the Success Ready Student Network. And we just had a chance to present to the State Board of Education recently, trying to advocate for the fact that it really is about what kids need to know and be able to do, and that we want to operate in more of a mastery focus. Like, it isn't okay just for us to sit through, put the time in, providing the instruction, and move on whether the kid gets it or not. We need them to understand the core standards that we're trying to get. So that is certainly a big piece of our work right now, is making sure that we're really standards focused on these priority standards, and that the student understands what it is they're supposed to do, and the teacher has just tremendous clarity around what it is we're trying to help them to get. That starts in our early childhood center, and we've focused so much on that. And the reason I take that tangent for a second, David, is because that's critical for that school and parent partnership to start there. Parents as Teachers is an incredible program. Our partnership with Jordan Valley Community Health is all predicated on the hope that we can get kids to start on a level playing field, that they can start ready, and so they can enter kindergarten reading ready, that they can get to us ready, because we do know if COVID did anything, it really highlighted the fact that when you get a little bit behind, it's really challenging to catch up. So back to your question, our work with the Success Ready Student Network, but more specifically with our core focus on proficiency scales and proficiency. Our teachers know where students are performing, and the student knows where they're performing. And engaging students in understanding of their own learning and where they are relative to the bar. As athletes, if they told you had to jump 5 feet, you're gonna work and work and work, and you're gonna know when you get over it. Well, I think sometimes kids didn't know where the bar was, and they didn't know where they were relative to the bar. And how can I, who goes to a football game without a scoreboard? I want to know where I am. And so what we have observed with our kids has been remarkable growth. We still have students who are grade level or 2 behind. We do, and that's nationwide, and that is our reality. We had that before COVID, and part of that's the reason why, with our core focus on early learning, is to get them to start ready and to not move them on. We have a great program at Easter Elementary called the Junior Jackets, or a jacket. It's a kindergarten program, Kinder Jacket. I'm sorry, I went off on the wrong name. But it really is just about kids who maybe age or developmentally aren't quite where they need to be, but they're going to get effectively kindergarten curriculum twice, because we want them to be where they need. We want them over the bar and every standard if we can. And so we will and do continue to have students who are struggling, and that growth. So we have, and parents will probably hear us talk some about it, is their typical growth. How much if I'm a good teacher and you're in my class, then you should be able to grow just by being in my class a year's worth of learning. That's typical. Mm-hmm. When a student is behind, we need them to grow what we call a stretch growth. They need to grow more than a year. And so that's part of our focus is to identify who is more than a grade level behind, and to help them have stretch growth with the idea that I have to go more in order to catch up. And so that's a journey we're on, and we continue to do that. And honestly, we have seen remarkable growth. We use an assessment tool called iReady, and some of our parents will be familiar with that. The work our schools and our leaders, and in particular our teachers, have engaged in has led our students to the kind of growth that assessment company, iReady, has asked, what are you doing? How are you doing that? And it really is just about clarity and tenacity, and the fact that we have staff who care passionately and we're making a difference. We don't have the numbers, all kids at grade level, but my goodness, they're making such growth, and we're closing that gap, and that's a huge celebration for us.
Let me talk to you about, and this was kind of an advent of COVID as well. We've seen a huge increase in Missouri in homeschooling. Some say a 10% raise in people now homeschooling. We've started to see more kids going to private institutions. Certainly here locally, I think nationally it's still at about 6%. I think there's 55 million public school students nationwide, about 5 million in private schools. But the private Christian school here has grown exponentially. Does people in your position now have to think about retooling some of the things they're doing since we're losing some of those students? And that's a funding issue.
It is, but I would want to start early, David, with saying that kudos to parents who are so invested in their kids that they want to make sure they have something that is unique that they're passionate for, whether it's homeschooling. You know, if done well, homeschooling is remarkable in making sure that the student has that personalized learning experience, and certainly with our private schools and our faith-based schools, private or parochial schools across the state, that's great. We want families to have choice. I mean, that's what is core to our country. But it circles back around to that much of the private school or charter school focus in the state of Missouri is in the large metropolitan areas. The vast majority of the 518 districts in Missouri are small rural communities. Even Lebanon, some might think we're one of the larger districts in the state, in the top 10% in size. There are so many small systems in the area, and so there just aren't going to be options. And so that's why I'm certainly an advocate, and I don't know if your question is leading to the concern. I celebrate family choice and getting to take their child to whatever school is of their liking. I mean, that's our country, and that's beautiful. But what I do know is that we have 4,500 kids who we have responsibility for, and we need to make sure that the funding mechanisms are there. And so the challenge that people may debate or may not debate is because it costs money for us to be able to operate a school system in large or small. And we have funding comes from the federal government, which has been a little bit tenuous and unsteady of late. About 40% of our funding comes from the state of Missouri, and the state of Missouri is currently rewriting the funding formula, which we don't know what that's going to look like. And then you have local effort, of which Lebanon, through Proposition Lebanon Schools, has absolutely just stepped up hugely. Not all communities are doing that, but those resources are critical for us to take care of kids who can't go to that private or parochial school. They don't have options, whether it's because their parents maybe don't have the resources or don't know how to. And so when we look at legislative issues, and this is where I may be going down another rabbit hole, but there are so many legislative pieces right now that are beginning to divert public dollars that are intended for kids like ours in Lebanon or in Conway or Stowland or you name the public school that need those funds to operate and take care of the kids who frankly don't have other options. But yet there's some legislative pieces that are taking those public taxpayer dollars and really allowing them to, through various mechanisms, go into non-public, whether it's a private or even a parochial environment. And again, I'm all about choice. I do know that the funding mechanisms and funding streams for public is and should be very different than it might be for private.
You bring up the choice, and there were some legislative efforts to allow parents to have a choice to where they send their kids to school. I probably, like you, I believe in choice, but I see that as a wrecking ball for public education. The idea that I can live in Lebanon, but I'm going to send my kid to school at Rolla for whatever purpose. And I get it, the parents should be involved and have choice, but I see a lot of major issues with that. I see that destroying some of the smaller schools that need that identity within their community. What was your thought on some of that?
On face value, I love capitalism, and I think competition is good. And at face value, you say, well, competition is good. And I even talked to legislators who use that and say, the competition is good. We need schools to compete. And I think that at the end of the day, the very beginning of our conversation, our core are kids. Our core is about children, and there will be winners and losers in competition. I mean, there will be districts that will not succeed. And what is that good for the kids in that community? Is that good for that community? And so I'm with you in this sense. I agree that it could be a wrecking ball. While I embrace competition and I'm kind of a very competitive person, when it comes to winners and losers, it is the kid that loses their hometown school potentially, but it's also that community that loses, in many cases, the lifeblood and the identity of the community. So I know they call it open enrollment for anyone who's listening, who's heard it. It's been a heavy topic in the legislative session for this last several years, and I'm told it's imminent, that it's coming. And if I could just share some experience from my time in Springfield. Springfield was an open enrollment district. I was a principal of one of the 5 high schools, and because of the way it was structured, there was one particular school that was for lack of a better word, dying. It was below less than 1,000 students, and so there was a huge influx of money, an influx of programming into that school. And that school's enrollment went from 1,000 up to 1,800 because it had unique and really special programming that attracted kids in. Well, those kids came from somewhere, and so they drew from the other schools, and so there was such a demographic change in the 5 high schools in Springfield. And so my experience was and again, as you said earlier, I was at Kickapoo High School. And one of the efforts we engaged in was I said, we're going to circle the wagons. We're going to recruit our kids, and we circled the wagons, and we really did a tremendous amount of work to win. But what the challenge is that all kids benefited when I worked with my other 4 colleagues at the other high schools, and we collaborated on best practices, and we helped make the phrase "high tides raise all ships." It went from this collegial, collaborative environment to I got a great idea, and we're going to work on it, and we're going to work on it here when you're not hearing about it because I need to win, and I just don't know that's good for kids, and I don't know that it's good for communities, and so it's a reality. So if and when that hits the legislative docket again, which it will this spring, I hope our communities, all the communities, will make sure their legislators understand that we need to be about kids and just supporting that.
And historically, this is not the first time Missouri's gone through this. 1948, the schools were reorganized, and I think the Department of Education in the state of Missouri was reorganized about 1972. And so there's been a lot of changes in education, not just in the classroom and all that, but you talk to certain people. I think reorganization of schools and those being adopted, that's why we have Lebanon R3, Springfield R12. They adopted or took over those school districts. I could see that being on the forefront, whether it's this year or 5 years from now. Right. I don't know the timeline. We've talked a lot about education and philosophy and some of the things that are going on. Real quickly, a lot of construction at the high school. Yes. That's going to look totally different. Where are we at on that?
It's you're right. It's going to be just a great facility for us. We're looking at 60,000 square feet of new construction there. It looks like nothing's happening. There's so much concrete going in, and they've been pouring concrete. They lost some. The springtime was not a great, very productive time because of the rains. But I'm told we should start to see steel go up in October, and so it's going to start to look really special. And We're still looking at a late, really winter of 26, and so December I think is the current substantial completion time, and so hopefully we're using it in the spring of 27 for students, and so yeah, it's going to be great, and I'll add, David, since we're talking about it, we're expecting to also next fall open up for the School of Discovery, for the Medical School of Discovery and Business spaces at the Robert W. Plaster Center for Student Success. And so the great part about that is we're looking at 20,000 square feet that is getting to be an asset for high school classroom space on top of that at just a fraction of the cost, because the infill is so much cheaper than to actually build new. So a lot of really great things happening for Lebanon High School and the programming for our kids. And circling back to our topic before, we do collaborate tremendously with and throughout our region. And so with our Go Caps Lake Region program, and so many of our regional schools are a part of that. The Lebanon Technology and Career Center is sending, we have schools from the region who send students to us. And so we do collaborate, and we want to continue to collaborate richly. And we think these facilities are just going to really enhance our ability to do that into the future.
And real quick, with that collaboration, not only do we see from school district to school district with Lebanon involved in Go Caps and some other projects, but you've been able to work with industry here in town to meet their needs. Mm-hmm. You and I'm older than you, and I'm going to have to finally get a guest where I can't say that. But there was such a push in my generation and probably your generation, go to college. Mm-hmm. That push is no longer that push, because there are so many opportunities of good paying jobs that now you've refocused a lot of that. We want kids to go to college that want to go to college, but those that don't, or maybe it's not a good fit, there's places for you to go, and a lot of your work has been focused in that area lately.
It has, and we talk about the students being our core focus, and that is so right. But if you're talking about from a business standpoint, who's our customer? The kids are our customer, but what we're trying to provide viable citizens for the community. Well, that also includes the workforce, the work community, and so 100% fortunate that the business industry in Lebanon has partnered with us, because we can't do that alone. I love the fact that OTC, the City of Lebanon, Cox, Lake Regional, Mercy, Jordan Valley have all collaborated for the medical simulation labs at the Robert W. Plaster Center for Student Success. And that's going to open up in October. The reason I mentioned that, and I really am glad you brought that back around, the whole premise of that, yes, we want to train professionals and let Lebanon be a hub. Right now, everyone drives right by Lebanon to go to Springfield to get trained and do those sim labs. They're going to come here now. But the comment was, let's fish upstream. They're looking for employees in the healthcare industry. Well, they're right here. Let's start investing in the kids, which is exactly the premise behind the medical School of Discovery and the proximity of that to the sim lab. I think our industry, or as a whole, sees that partnership will produce incredible employees for the future. And if I know you've seen this, but I talk about it all the time. The Lebanon Rustic, the 1924 magazine or newspaper, 1924, 100 years ago, had that full page ad that said, "Let's keep them in Lebanon." And it was sponsored by the Lebanon area. I don't know if it was called exactly that, but the Lebanon Chamber of Commerce. And I think it's so cool that Lebanon got it 100 years ago. And I think that what might be different is I think we're doing a better job of putting our money where our mouth is as far as building those bridges, because kids are getting into the workforce. Yes, college may be the option, maybe it's not, but it's just something beyond high school, some special training that we've got to provide them, and it's just great. We're really fortunate to have a community with so many resources like we do.
Thank you for the visit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
There is no doubt that the Lebanon school system is the hub of Lebanon in many, many ways. We have great industry here, but our education system is so important. We've seen great strides since 2018 in keeping our teachers here and retaining those and being able to attract new people into that profession. It's been a big difference in the way this community sees itself and how other people see this community. You've been in the box, and I'm David Millsap on Lebanon Now.